Good afternoon, everyone. Kalla here. Welcome to my live stream. Glad you could make it today. So today we will be resuming our playthrough of Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, or to be precise, the second game in that collection, Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve, and the first case in that. So last time, the attorney this time is Susato, dressed as a boy, trying to defend her best friend from the accusation of murder of the Swan Hat lady from the last game. I'm pretty sure that this journalist is the one that did it, and I'm pretty sure he did it with poison, and I really need to pin it on him, so let's get on into it. So what are you going to say this time, press boy? Oh yes, I stabbed the English woman, and that's the very fact that proves I'm innocent. Excuse me? Excuse me? Because why would I have bothered to stab the woman if I'd already poisoned her? To cover up the fact you poisoned her. When I heard the student girl and that pompous English murderer arguing, it got my goat. If the courts weren't going to punish Brett for what she did, then someone else would have to see justice done. Sir! Sir! So you admit it then? That everything happened as I described? That you're the one who stabbed Miss Brett in the back through the reed screen? You can blame this miserable country of ours. Hi, Yuri. Enjoy your lurking. A country that bows to the pressure of foreign powers and lets murderers walk free. What kind of future can a country like that have? That's why I did it. I did what our pathetic leaders didn't have the guts to do. Slap bang in the middle of that charming lady's back, I plunged the blade of sweet justice right in there. As someone who spends his life seeing that the truth is told, I feel really, really awful about giving false information in my testimony before. But as it turns out, there was someone else who had it in for the victim and got to her before me. No, I'm still pretty sure you poisoned her as well. I can prove it too. I know I can prove it. Because I'm pretty darn sure that that poison was in your pen. That's right, you guessed it. That pretty little student girl. Now there's a woman after my own heart. You're implicating Ray again. She's the one who gave the poison to the Englishwoman and ended her pitiful existence. I don't know why I'm making the journalist guy Cockney. I think it's the way he's dressed. It makes me want to make him a Cockney, even though I know he's Japanese. And suddenly, snap! This journo here is off the hook. The argument is sound, certainly. If the witness had administered the poison himself, he need only have waited for it to take effect. Subsequently stabbing the victim in the back would have been entirely nonsensical. Or, you know, to cover up the fact that he poisoned her. And therefore, this reporter had nothing to do with the poisoning. Yes, it's all quite logical. That's right, it is. Logical and true. I'm glad you've seen the light. Justice at last. This is unbelievable. After I'd made so much progress in proving his guilt, is he going to get away with it now? Think of Kazuma-sama and Naruhodo-san. They never stopped looking for a way forward until the judge's final gavel. Very well then, counsel. Proceed with what I assume to be your final cross-examination in this trial. Yes, Your Excellency. Right, time to press all the things.
Hold it!
So, you do admit that you had murderous intentions towards Miss Brett, then? Ha! The woman's very existence offended my sense of justice. Your sense of... He's claiming some sort of righteous indignation? She was pure evil, a cold-blooded killer who'd committed murder right here on our Empire's soil. But did our good-for-nothing government do anything? Not a chance. Someone had to step in. Fly the flag of justice, put things right for the people. Yes, it was my civic duty, that's what drove me to do it. So, in summary, murderous intentions, then. Whatever you want to call it, the point is this. That Englishwoman was a blight. So I had to do what was right. For society. Yet a real wrong was done by the student girl in the dock. A crime for which she must pay. Why is it okay for him to stab her and it's not okay for my friend to poison her, although it's not like my friend actually poisoned her? Because you definitely poisoned her, Mr. Giorno. Obviously, because the poisoning was nothing to do with me at all.
Hold it!
So you still maintain that you didn't give the poison to the victim? Obviously, that'd be like putting a belt on your trousers when you were already wearing braces like these. The accused administered the poison, following which this witness stabbed the victim. An unforgivable act, certainly, but not one of murder. That crime rests on the accused's shoulders. No. That is how the law works, you see, yokel. Who knows, you may even learn something here today. 2 consecutive attempts on her life in the space of minutes. Quite a day for the victim. Do something that evil and you got it coming. That's how the law works. The law of reckoning. Really? That's not the kind of law this court upholds. You will reiterate why you were compelled to stab the victim then, witness.
Hold it!
What exactly were they arguing about? About what happened in that restaurant 9 months ago, that's what. The student girl was laying into the Englishwoman for killing her beloved mentor, Dr. Wilson. Yes, John H. Wilson. A professor of medicine invited here from England by Professor Mikitova, no less. Right, but the Englishwoman just jeered. That case was to be heard by the British Consular Court in Shanghai. However, there is little doubt that she would simply have been acquitted and sent back to her homeland a free woman. Why, though? It was eating that student girl up inside, you could see it. I really felt for her. Oh. Speaking of the student girl, I'm guessing it's... Yep. I can't! I can't stand here and listen to this tripe. Ray? Young girl, you stand accused here. You can't just blurt out whenever you feel like it. No, you can't. Sorry, but I'm in the middle of some very important testimony here. Just keep quiet and listen. But this awful man is making all of this up. Susato, please, you have to make them listen. Return to the dock at once, Membami-san. We are in the middle of a cross-examination.
Hold it!
Your Excellency, please, I implore you. That journalist is clearly not a trustworthy witness. Exactly! He's a filthy, rotten, black-hearted, bigoted, dirty, great peeping Tom! Whoa, take it easy there. Please, I really think the court should hear what the defendant has to say. Your Excellency, I see no need whatsoever to entertain the accused's remarks. I will grant the request of the defense. Yes! But, Your Excellency! This is likely to be the last cross-examination of these proceedings. As such, I believe it would be ill-advised to stifle the defendant's obvious concerns. So, whilst recognising that this contravenes regular protocol, I hereby call upon the defendant to speak. Oh! Thank you so much, Your Excellency. It was nothing to do with Dr. Wilson. We were discussing the stolen poison.
Hold it!
The stolen poison that killed the victim, you mean? I suspect her of being the one to steal it. I mean, just think about how she killed Dr. Wilson. That's true. Additionally, Miss Brett certainly had knowledge of the new poison. But surely it would be no easy task to steal a highly secret toxin being developed for the government. Indeed. All visitors to the laboratory are thoroughly searched when they leave. Even if a thief managed to avoid being seen by myself or a colleague, getting the poison out would be very difficult. That's true. No, that's not my Soseki voice. That's true. I pestered Professor Mikotober until he agreed to show me the poison when I visited his laboratory. But as I left, I was searched from top to tail. Miss Brett rather bluntly revealed the existence of the toxin we'd been developing, you see. And since Soseki-san expressed such an interest in it, I felt unable to refuse. Obviously, I gave nothing away, other than the fact it was an extremely potent substance. I'm very ashamed of myself. It's just that I've had a singularly terrible experience with a deadly poison. I wanted to look my old enemy in the eye! Surely you can understand that! To find out if my suspicions were true, I confronted Miss Brett about the poison. I told her that if there was to be an incident involving it somehow, it wouldn't just be the university. The military would be dragged into it, the whole government even. It would be a complete disaster. And how did Miss Brett respond to your concerns? She just curled those beautiful lips of hers and said she didn't know the first thing about it. In English, actually. Ah, yes. Many Memo-san, one small question if you don't mind. Do you understand English? Right. I do mind, can't you see I'm busy? Clearly you were outside the beach hut listening in whilst the defendant and Miss Brett were conversing. Presumably, then, it was you who wrote this article about what you'd heard. Exclusive. Deadly poison stolen from Yume Medical Research Laboratory. The story was published in this morning's edition of Shoyu News. The details are too accurate for it to have been written by anyone else. Oh, so basically that means he was lying about what he just said he heard. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes! Look at this! The entire article! It's almost what I said to Miss Brett, word for word. Yeah. Well, Many Memo-san. As a journo and as a citizen of a free country, I don't have to reveal my sources. That's a founding principle of Many Memoism. Father's clearly right about this. That reporter did write that article, and he based it on what he overheard from outside the hut. The details of the poison article have been updated in the court record. The reporter, Many Memo-san, based it on information he gleaned by eavesdropping. So that's what it was all about. You were trying to cover up the fact that you were listening in. That's why you came up with that stinking story about me arguing with her. Shut up! My stories never stink. Look, whatever you say, little girl, it doesn't alter the facts. Your Excellency, there's something I want to say, and I want it to go on record. Very well, you may amend your formal testimony. The point is, if you'd poisoned someone, there'd be no reason to go and stab the person as well.
Hold it!
Perhaps you doubted the efficacy of the poison and sought to make sure your victim would die. That's all stung. What? That would be like pouring pepper on your Chinese ramen before you'd even tasted it. Completely reckless. Although it might surprise you to learn I am a bit of an impetuous pepper pourer as it happens. Once the victim had taken the poison, she would have been only minutes away from death. And yet this man then proceeded to stab her in the back as well. There has to have been a good reason for that. If it was the reporter who gave the poison to Miss Brett, then clearly he must have done it prior to Ray entering the hut. Yes, that's undeniable. But between him leaving the hut and the victim being stabbed, there was one very crucial change in the situation. Sorry? What change? The reporter overheard the conversation between Ray and the Englishwoman. Yes, that's it. That's when Memo-san first found out the exact nature of the poison he'd used. That could be the key here. If the victim had unwittingly taken the poison already, the reporter would have had no reason to stab her. On the face of it, that logic sounds entirely reasonable. But there's no question that this man was responsible for Miss Brett's murder. If we could think of a plausible explanation as to why he might have stabbed her even after the poisoning, I feel sure that everything would drop into place. That's what we should be looking for. Yes, I agree. And in order to do that, I must try to glean more information. Okay, I think have we pressed all of these now? Why would I bother to stab the woman if I'd already poisoned her? The point is, if you'd poisoned someone, there'd be no reason to then go stab the person as well. I think there is. And I think it's going to be related to this. Let's have a look at it. Yeah. I think it must be because of what he learned about it potentially coming in via a wound from a poison-laced blade. I think he stabbed her because he knew that Ray would then try and pull the dagger out to try and make sure that not enough of the poison got in. I think. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this.
Objection!
Well, I can think of one reason. What? But before I explain, I'd like you to confirm something for the court. Did you glean all of the information for this newspaper article from what you overheard outside the hut? Of course he did. Of course he did. There can be no question of that. After all, when we were all in the laboratory together, all we were told was that it was a terrible toxin. And there's one more important fact to consider. According to the witness, Mbami-san's verbal attack against the victim began as soon as she entered the hut. In other words, it would have been impossible for her to have slipped the poison into Miss Brett's drink.
Objection!
Where are you going with this, Counsel? Many Memo-san has made it quite clear that he observed every single thing that happened in the beach hut. If the defendant had somehow found an opportunity, this man would have seen it. Yeah! Which means that Miss Brett couldn't have imbibed the poison whilst the defendant was present. In fact, it must have been administered to her before Membami-san entered the hut. Yes, very articulately put. When I walked into the hut, I immediately started to press Miss Brett about the poison. At which point Many Memo-san overheard some worrying information. Worrying information? What worrying information? The information which he subsequently included in his newspaper article. Namely, that the poison was being developed in strict secrecy and that it couldn't be readily obtained. Absolutely. In fact, that's quite an understatement. The only possible place it could have come from is my lab. And furthermore, anyone afflicted by the poison would exhibit telltale signs in death. The extreme constriction of the pupils. Yes, it's quite stark when you see it. There are other poisons that show similar symptoms, but not among new substances that are undetectable. In other words, it would be clear that the victim's life had been ended by the use of this particular poison, which would reduce the number of suspects to only a handful of people. Ah! Everyone in my laboratory is aware of the unique properties of the toxin we've been developing. None of them would be foolish enough to attempt to use it for some nefarious deed. Membami-san being no exception. Therefore, we can conclude that whoever administered this unique poison to the victim was a layperson, unaware of its telltale properties. Yeah. In other words, someone like you, right, and many memo. Yeah. It was you who stole the poison from the laboratory that day, and it was you who administered it to the unwitting victim. But you quickly realized that was a terrible mistake. Because the poison caused such unusual symptoms and was so traceable. As you listened in from the far side of the beach hut's thin walls, you learnt of these facts. But you'd already given the victim the poison at that point. It was too late. So you hatched a plan to disguise your mistake. A plan that involved stabbing the victim in the back through the reed screen.
Attention!
But what good could that possibly do? Isn't it obvious, Counsel? The plan was to kill Miss Brett before the poison could take effect. Once in the blood, the poison causes the onset of pupil constriction. But he had hoped to precipitate the victim's death before that happened, hadn't he? Exactly. Because without any revealing signs of the new secret poison's use, no one would ever have suspected. This is extraordinary. Yes, the effect of the poison meant it would be too easily identified, so the killer had to mask its use. But he attempted to do so by plunging a knife into the middle of the victim's back. Order, order, order! The argument presented is sound. The court is satisfied that it warrants consideration. Does the prosecution have a counter-argument it wishes to put forward? Well, there are a number of... I mean, yes! I counter completely.
Objection!
The prosecution's evasive response clearly shows that in much the same way as he nurtures the remnants of his topknot, he is clinging to lost hope. Lost hope? Ooh, cat's on the floor. You pathetic, useless, fallen samurai! Fallen? Who are you calling fallen? My burgeoning growth is on the rise. I don't need a counter-argument. What are you talking about? It should be blatantly obvious. I stole the poison, you say? Gave it to the victim, you say? Stabbed her, you say? Lots of fine theories. But I don't need a counter-argument because you don't have an argument yourself. Where's your evidence? Well, Many Momo-san, I have evidence. I've been waiting to use this evidence for a while. Yes, you make it sound so plausible, don't you? Without evidence, it means nothing. Whereas I base my news on facts. Facts? What do you mean? Explain yourself. I mean, what the professor said earlier in this... Yeah, he's gonna try and claim that there was no way he could have stolen the poison, but I know exactly how he did it. I mean, what the professor said earlier in this trial. It's all here, in my many memos. Every word, every slip of the tongue, all noted. That's what the Shoryu News is famous for. It's the power of the printed word. But surely it would be no easy task to steal a highly secret toxin being developed for the government. Indeed, all visitors to the laboratory are thoroughly searched when they leave. Even if a thief managed to avoid being seen by myself or a colleague, getting the poison out would be very difficult. Except that Many Momo got it out in his pen. So, real easy. What's that then? Blown the story wide open? See, I write in Many Momo, a mere reporter from the Shoryu News. Couldn't possibly have stolen that poison from the professor's laboratory. No, it's fine. Susato-san, it's fine. We can prove it. There can't be any question of it. He must have stolen the poison that day. He stole it. And used it to kill. And if that's the case... As you've identified, the poison itself is the definitive evidence we need. Because whoever stole it from the laboratory that day is the true culprit here. What's your point, you annoyingly handsome country bumpkin? She is very handsome, isn't she? My point is this. There is one way that you, Many Momo-san, could have stolen the poison that day. I have heard enough verbal conjecture now, thank you. What the court must be shown is evidence. What proof do you have that this witness stole the poison on the day in question? I have his fountain pen, sir. The proof, Your Excellency, is this fountain pen. Yeah, a fountain pen? How can that possibly be relevant? These magical pens somehow seem to have enough ink to write many thousands of kanji characters. I believe they arrived in my country for the first time some 15 years ago now. I swear by a weasel hair calligraphy brush and nothing else. These newfangled pens are merely a fad. Well, as a forward-thinking man of words, obviously I love my fountain pen. Suck up a soup... I don't know how to pronounce that. Supercon of sumptuous ink, and one's work is awash with words in the blink of an eye. That's right. Fountain pens have a small reservoir in the barrel, into which ink is sucked up through the nib of the pen in order to write with later. What does all this talking of sucking up ink have... Ah! And just as it's possible to suck ink up into the reservoir, it's also possible to eject it out through the nib again, of course. My word, can this really be? Well, Many Momo-san? When you saw the deadly poison before your eyes in the laboratory that day, you used your fountain pen. Your very lifeblood to steal some of it, didn't you? By siphoning the poison up through the nib and into the pen's reservoir. Yeah! More absurdity! That never happened! True, we've heard that there were procedures in place to prevent thefts like this from the laboratory. But would anyone have thought to look inside a fountain pen of all places? No, I'm a little ashamed to say that for fear of offending our guests, such a detailed search would not have been conducted. Well, this is quite startling, I must say. I remind the court that this pen was found in the clutches of the victim when she died. In other words, it was dropped at the scene by Many Memo-san. So the crucial question is, when exactly was the pen dropped? Are you suggesting... The natural conclusion is that in your haste to act while the victim was distracted for a moment, you dropped the pen after you emptied the poison from it into her glass.
Objection!
There could be any number of alternative explanations. For example, the witness could have been using his pen to write down details of his conversation with the victim. And when shocked by one of her outrageous answers, the pen fell from his quivering hand.
Objection!
No, that can't be. If it was, how do you explain why the pen was devoid of ink? What? As you can see for yourself if you examine the evidence, there would appear to be no ink present in the reservoir. What newspaper reporter goes to interview someone with nothing in his pen? No, the pen was dropped after the poison that filled its reservoir had been emptied into the victim's glass. Witness, what do you have to say in your defense? Ha 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 ha! So this is how our modern justice system works, is it? So what if the ink in my pen runs dry? So what if my pencil snaps? I can always claw my way back into the game. I have plenty in reserve. Yeah! Excuse me, why are you throwing pencils like kunai? Claim I stuck the poison up into my pen. That's wild speculation, nothing more. No, actually I can prove it. If you thought you could bring down a fine upstanding citizen with a trick like that, think again. It looks as though it's going to take one final decisive blow to finish this matter. As I see it, the situation now is very simple. It rests upon whether or not this witness did indeed steal the poison on the day in question. And therefore, it all depends on whether or not the defense can prove that he did with evidence. No such evidence could possibly exist.
Objection!
Many Memo-san, this is how our modern justice system works. What? In the courtroom, evidence is everything. Something you would do well to remember. Because we are well past the point of speculation at this stage, I assure you. Very well then, I call upon the defense to present the aforementioned evidence. This is it then. This will be the final piece in the puzzle. The defense can prove, by means of this item, that it was the witness's pen that was used to steal the poison. The chemical reagent.
Take that!
Counsel, what is that bottle? This bottle contains the unique chemical reagent that can identify the poison in question. Yeah. Yes, that poison is an entirely new synthesis of alkaloids developed by my colleagues and I. It would be impossible to detect traces of it by any other method. Or, from another perspective, simply with this chemical reagent, anybody at all could check for traces of the poison. A reagent? What? One drop of the contents of this bottle on the tip of your fountain pen, Many Memo-san, is all it will take to solve this case beyond all reasonable doubt. Ah. No, you can't. I won't. Your crimes are bad enough, but at least know when to admit defeat. Your Excellency, the defense requests permission to carry out the test on the fountain pen at once. Yeah. Whoa, what are you doing with your camera, sir? He's speaking too fast. Hey! Thrown to the floor. Right, okay. Sorry, let's go back through the history and go through that. This isn't my fault. The Empire drove me to this, trying to hold its head high as a civilized nation, but bowing its head to every foreign power's whim. I took up arms in the form of a mighty pen. I fought tirelessly on the battlefield of news, all in the name of justice and righteousness. Yes, many memoism is the paragon of justice. Many memo! Susato with me. I'm there. Hey, yeah. There we go. Did I do it right? That was a Susato takedown, wasn't it? Actually, speaking of Susato takedowns, actually, give me a second. I believe we need to update the throw counter. Not quite. That was a Ryutaro takedown. The instant the first drop of the reagent touched the nib of the fountain pen, it was clear to everyone present. When I saw it there in the lab, the poison, the devil got hold of me and decided to do it on a whim. I excused myself and emptied all the ink down the sink in the bathroom, washing the reservoir out carefully. And then you waited for an opportunity to suck up some of the poison, didn't you? Into your fountain pen. Yes, that's right. Answer me one thing, Many Memo-san. Why did you steal it? For what purpose? Isn't it obvious? To find out what it was made of and expose it in an article. I mean, it was a secret project after all, too juicy for a journo like me to pass up. Then why did the Englishwoman end up dead? I went into that hut intending to quiz her on the situation, that's all, as a reporter. A known killer enjoying full freedom, evading justice by leaving the country. I told her what I thought about it. And she just laughed in my face. Oh, what's this? A Far Eastern caveman purporting to practice journalism? Really, you must learn the difference between reporting and listening at doorways, you ignorant plebeian. What did you call me? This country, with its pretensions to a justice system, to a free press, it's really very depressing. You see our superior ways in the West, yet you lack the mental capacity to emulate them. Get out of here, you oaf. Get out and crawl back into the cave you came from. That's when I remembered about the deadly poison I happened to have in my pen at the time. What a terrible tale. In my head, I knew I should just get out of there as quickly as possible, but I couldn't. I couldn't let her get away with what she'd done when she clearly had no remorse at all. I suppose it was my journo spirit getting all fired up. I'd like to ask you something. Yes? You often talk about justice. But surely as a journalist you could have used other means to deliver the justice you sought. There's no justice in the press. Sorry? After that trial 9 months ago, I kept digging and digging to find out what happened in that courtroom. And finally, I discovered the truth. It was a cover-up, that's what it was. A cover-up? What do you mean? I would remind you of your position, witness. Be careful of what you say. Oh, come on, doesn't it strike you as strange? We're suddenly not allowed to convict a foreign national. Consular jurisdiction should never have come into it. And yet that puffed-up Englishwoman was going to sail away into the sunset a free woman. The only possible explanation is that behind the scenes, some deal had gone down between Britain and Japan. What sort of deal? I'd done my research, dug up all the dirt. It was all ready to be published. But you know what happened? The editor just tore the article up. You came under pressure from the government, you mean? If our government is going to let criminals walk free, if they're going to crush the free press, then what choice do I have but to see that justice is done myself? Let's not forget, Menimomo-san, that you committed murder yourself, and you tried to lay the blame at the defendant's door. I'm sorry, but you're no better than Jezzael Brat. What? The truth is, you have no right to talk about justice at all. I suppose... It would appear that we have reached a conclusion in this trial at last. Counsel for the defense, Ryotaro Naruhodo. Oh! Ah, yes! Sorry, Your Excellency, just musing in a manly way here. It's almost unbelievable that this is your first experience of the Supreme Court. It was an excellent performance. In truth, it very much reminded me of your cousin's exploits. Oh, Naruhodo... Ryunosuke, you mean? The way he handled the trial 9 months ago and the way you handled this one, it gives me hope that we are genuinely entering a new era of justice in this land. That's very flattering, Your Excellency. Hearing the defence you put forward today made me feel most keenly that the future of our justice system will be forged by you and your contemporaries. Thank you. So, Prosecutor Aochi, do you have any final thoughts? Prosecutor Aochi? I, Takatsuchi and the Aochi clan have been bested by a Kalla youth not once now, but twice. If there was any shred of my former self left, it has withered and died here today. Wait, that's a knife on there. Sir? Sir? Gosh, your journey to cultural enlightenment sure took a while, didn't it? Silence! No? Think about the people who have to clean up after you, sir. Rather than living on in shame, I will end it all now with this blade. For that is the true path to Aochiism. ouchieism? One hopes that that's the only way in which he'll be modelling himself after the witness. Sprig of my top knot. The time is right for farewell. Okay, he's gonna cut his hair off, that's fine, good. Hope is lost forever. Taketsuchi. Yeah. Farewell to the hair. He appears to be acknowledging his baldness. Now, in regard to the defendant, Reima Mbawi-san. Yes, Your Excellency? I have reached my final verdict. I hereby find you not guilty. Hey. Aww, look at the sakura petals falling as confetti. Court is adjourned. August 2:38 p.m. Supreme Court of Judicature. Defendant's Antechamber 3. It's over. My heart is still pounding in my chest, though. It's all I can do just to stay standing. Lawyers have such great responsibility, such a great burden to bear. Don't they, Naruhodo-san? Susato! Thank you so much! You were so dashing in that! Ray and Father. Honestly, I'm so touched by everything you've... Oh no, I think I'm going to cry. It wasn't easy, but together we made it. I was on the verge of tears at the end too. The only reason I'm still here is because of you. Oh no, I can't take all the credit. It took courage to tell the truth in there. You did wonderfully, Ray. So I would have to say that the congratulations belong to you. Susato, don't be so standoffish. Sorry? We're friends, equals, and the trial's over, so no more of this formal super humility nonsense. It's time to celebrate with swagger, to throw caution to the wind. Caution to the... what? I'm the great defense lawyer Ritaro Naruhodo, and I'm taking you out to a milk bar tomorrow. Or something. Right, I see. I'll think about it, Ray. At any rate, we really knocked the wind out of that horrid man. It felt so good. Yes, it was satisfying. It really was. Isn't there anyone else we could throw together? She says, looking at her dad. I hope you're not looking at me, Ray. Oh, my goodness! No, of course not! Of course not! Ah, there it is at last. Ray's lovely smile. You fought for your friend to the very last. As your father, I am extremely proud of you, Defense Attorney Ryutaro Naruhodo. Thank you, but I couldn't have done it without your help. Anyway, it's time to bid farewell to Ryutaro, I think. I shall miss him in a way, but it's back to Susato Mikotoba now. So, I'll never see him again then? What a terrible shame! Susato, your best friend appears to have a crush on your male alter ego. What? What is happening? Ah, Soseki-san and Inspector Hosonaga. I do hope you've been keeping well. Is that really you? Yes, I had to change my appearance for, well, obvious reasons, I hope, but it's me. Susato Mikotoba. I don't... So dashing, so divine! No! Doubly dashing, yes! And devilishly divine, just look at you! Look at your face, Suseki-san. I had no idea, Miss Susato-san Esquire, that you were Lucas student Naruhodo-san Esquire's cousin. You've got the wrong end of the stick there a little bit. Astonishingly astounding ace attorney! Poor Soseki-san, so confused. I still remember the first time I ever met him. He was in a prison cell in London. What an extraordinary conundrum it was that the unwitting student from Japan found himself embroiled in. But after Naruhodo-san's skillful defense at the Old Bailey, Soseki-san was free to return to Japan. And now he seems to have earned himself great fame as an author. I'm stunned! That's a truly impressive disguise. Even I had no idea, and I'm a chief inspector with the police bureau, who came up with Mr. Turtle, no less. I'm not sure you should be admitting to that, Inspector. Amazing. You're a woman of many faces, I see. Just two, really. And this was a once-in-a-lifetime event. I hope. Oh, I'm not a patch on you, though, Inspector. Well, I am a professional, of course. I do worry about Inspector Hosonaga sometimes, I really do. 9 months ago, when he appeared here at the Supreme Court to testify, he was undercover, disguised as the head waiter of a restaurant. And then on the steamships to Great Britain, of course, disguised as a sailor to keep us safe on the journey. Though that didn't help you, did it, Kazuma-sama? From my perspective, I have to admit that I have mixed feelings about all this. I mean, now the truth has been lost forever. What do you mean? I'm talking about the murder that the Englishwoman committed at the end of last year. Ah, yes, it was an English doctor she killed, as I understand it. Dr. John H. Wilson, yes. The man I invited to Japan personally. The mystery is, why did she kill him? And now that the culprit herself is dead, we'll probably never know the answer. On the voyage to Great Britain, we had the most unexpected encounter. With Mr. Sherlock Sholmes, the great detective, I mean. Yes, I remember Mr. Sholmes well, of course. Ah, my arch-nemesis! How lightly you utter his name! Well, according to the stories published about him in The Adventures of Sherlock Sholmes, the detective once had a partner who helped him solve crimes. A best friend. And that man was an exceptional doctor of medicine by the name of John H. Wilson. What? Dr. Wilson? I just can't believe that it's a coincidence. I think that the English Doctor of Medicine killed here in Japan 9 months ago must have been the friend and partner of Mr. Sholmes. And if that's really true, then the poor girl won't ever see her beloved father again. As you know, I travelled to Great Britain once myself to study. It was around the time you were born. Yes, grandmother told me about it. On returning to Japan, I took up my professorship at the Imperial Yume University. But I also serve another role, as an advisor to the government on diplomatic affairs. Yes, I was aware of that as well. In that case, I'm sure you understand that there are some confidential matters I cannot divulge to you. Could you just tell me one thing? Why did you summon me back to Japan? It's been 2 months now since I returned. When I left England, it was because an urgent telegram had arrived from Japan. It said that you'd collapsed with a high fever and you were growing weaker by the day. What? Where did that news come from? That's what I'd like to know. Because after that long sea voyage, I found you in fine health, Father. Was there something in Great Britain that you perceived might inconvenience me in some way, or harm me? That's really the only explanation I can think of. Dear me, do you reserve your most cutting glares for your father, Susato? I'm sorry, my dear, I simply can't. Ah, let me go! Many Moe-san. So, one throw wasn't enough for you? I got one last thing to say before they take me away. Professor. Me? I know the truth. I know you had a hand in what went on. In that visiting student's fate. Visiting student? Jezebel Brett, you mean? No, not her. The student of law who left for Great Britain 8 months ago. What? Student of law? He must mean... Kazuma-sama. What are you talking about? What does any of this have to do with Kazuma-sama? Nobody here in Japan knows anything about it. They don't know that the guy never made it to England, that he died on that steamship. And that he'll never... Ah! Ooh, thrown by the judge! That's still a throw though, so... Sure count 10. Well, I didn't expect to find him in here. What were you officers playing at? Terribly sorry, Your Excellency. I was coming to tell you that the rickshaw has arrived, Eugen, and it's a good job I came by. Yes, thank you for dealing with him, and I'll be there shortly. Mikatoba, what do you know? Oh, Your Excellency. Ha 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 ha! The trial's over. I'm not Your Excellency anymore, merely your father's friend, Seishiro Jigoku. And may I say, since I saw you last, you seem to have taken on a more dashing appearance. Susato. Did you know all along, from the start of the trial? Ha 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 ha! A judge sees everything, Susato. I couldn't let you take the risk. If Seishiro here hadn't known that and then he'd recognized you. So I had a word in his ear beforehand, as an old friend. So, Seishiro, shall we? Yes, having ruled on that case, we now have various diplomatic issues to address. Before you go, Father! Sorry, my dear, we shall have to return to our earlier conversation at a later date. But well done again, both of you. You did admirably. Oh, thank you very much. What did you think of my Seishiro sling, eh? It's been a while since I sent a man flying like that. Ha 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 ha! Whatever could father be hiding from me? About Jezaiel Bratz, about Dr. Wilson. And now it seems, according to the reporter, about Kazuma-sama. I'm going to have to bring this up with father sometime, when nobody else is around. Judicial Assistant Mikotoba-san, Esquires, could I have a word? Oh, yes, of course, Suseki-san. What is it? I think perhaps it could be fate that we're meeting again like this now. You see, there's something I need to tell you. Oh? I believe that it may be related to the reason why your father summoned you back from England. This I have to hear. Please, Soseki-san, tell me at once. I will! As you know, my time in England was terrible. Cursed, I have no doubt. Such awful things I was embroiled in. Thank goodness locum student Naruhodo-san Esquire stepped in. After he secured my freedom, I couldn't wait to get on a ship back here to my homeland. Having arrived in Japan, I submitted a report about my experiences to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The next thing I knew, I had a visitor. It was your father, Professor Mikotoba. He wanted to ask me all sorts of things about my report. My father? He seemed to be especially taken with a particular part of the report. Anyway, he left eventually, having thoroughly quizzed me. But it was the very next day that he sent the telegram to you asking you to return to Japan. What was it then? The particular part my father was interested in? I don't really know exactly. But do you remember them? Those two terrible cases I was caught up in? Of course, I could never forget. Your father seemed to consider himself mainly with the second case. The second one? You mean the one Mr. Sholmes forbade any of us to talk about in public? Which is why the only case involving you that any member of the public is aware of is the first. Oh, there's another thing involved? Well, I don't care! I don't have to listen to what that dastardly detective says. Anyway, the point is, it seems that case somehow holds the key to all these curious unanswered questions. That horrific, hideous, heinous case. The case of the haunted lodgings. That case somehow caused my father to summon me urgently back to Japan? I thought that whole business was over. But it seems I was wrong. Perhaps that was only the start. Perhaps the story is not yet told.
So, the mystery of that English woman's death is solved, thank goodness. And having stood in the Supreme Court now, I think I can comprehend a little better. How you must be feeling as you fight for people's freedom in a foreign land, Naruhodo-san. But actually, I'm writing to you today because of another matter. I met Soseki-san and we talked about that second case he was involved in. Father has said nothing to me, but I feel certain of it. That case holds the key to some great unsolved mystery.
Ooh.
My notes on the case should still be in the office, tucked away at the back of the shelves on the left. Perhaps you might like to look over them again. Today, for the first time this year, it feels as though summer has arrived. The sky is a brilliant blue. It makes me long to see you again. Yours, Sisata.
Suspicious. And that's that first case over. So I'm gonna take a quick break before beginning on the second one. So I will be right back. And I'm back. And let's move on with apparently the memoirs of the clouded Kokoro. Yes. Episode 2. Memoirs of the clouded How did Cooper out?
It was a ghastly tale of a winter's night. One of an invisible killer and a crime perpetrated on the pavement along Briar Road. As the victim lay at death's door, the mystery of just who had stabbed the young lady from behind had been resolved. But no sooner had my friend saved that Eastern Exchange student from his harrowing plight than in the dim, flickering shadows of gaslight did a second bizarre crime rend the stillness of that very night.
Ooh.
I dare say most can still recall the sensational headlines of the day. Haunted apartment of death, the condemned criminal's curse, the dread demon of coal gas. Yet, though the great detective had at once discerned the truth upon his arrival at the scene, it only proved to be the overture that announced the rising of the curtain on a most tragic play.
Ooh. Tragic play. My name is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I'm a fledgling lawyer just starting out on my journey. 6 months ago, I arrived as a visiting student of law, having made the long voyage across the sea from the Empire of Japan to here, London, England. And on the way, in quite extraordinary circumstances, I made the acquaintance of a world-famous detective. Currently, I reside in the attic of the detective's own lodgings, from where I run my legal consultancy of sorts. I've successfully defended a number of clients in Britain's highest court, the Old Bailey. But since a particularly grueling and unforgettable legal battle 4 months ago now, I haven't returned to the courtroom. In fact, I lost my right to return. But that epic trial was just one small part of an epic tale. A tale which was now about to awaken from slumber. Thanks to a letter that arrived this morning from my homeland. What a delicious smell wafting up the stairs. It must be nearly time for breakfast. I'd better go down to Mr. Sholmes's suite and say good morning to the great detective and his flatmate. 30th of August, 7:28 a.m. Sholmes's suite. Oh, Bruno, good! I was just about to call up to you. The bacon's ready. Good morning, Iris. It smells delicious as usual. Before we eat, though, I have some news. I had a surprise this morning. Shh! Not another word, Mr. Naruhodo. This could just be the abstruse thing for my pre-breakfast stagnation-repelling mental stimulation, my dear fellow. Morning to you too, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, yes, I see. So that's it. Too close. Too close, Sholmes. The truth is as clear as day to me. My faculties of observation have revealed it again. What are you talking about? You, Mr. Naruhodo, you have this very morning met with a surprise. Well, is that not the case? I just told you that. Really, my dear fellow, it barely warrants explanation. Firstly, your hair is particularly unkempt, somewhat reminiscent of a bird's nest. Secondly, you have neglected to fasten the third button of your jacket. Clearly, when considered together, these two facts point to you having been flustered this morning. Can I talk now? But of course. Though I don't look for admiration, you understand. My hair always looks like this. It's been this way since I first met you. Oh, it has? And the button was ripped off last night, if you remember. By you. Hurley pulled your button off? Ah, yes, I recall the incident now. It was after supper, was it not? As the evening advanced, I picked up my violin and began to play the wailing notes of a haunting tune. But then, to my utter dismay, the third string snapped. Why did it have to happen? Why? Little wonder then that in my vexation I grabbed the first button I saw and ripped it from its proper place. Well, I'd like it back now, please. It's troubling that I can't fasten my jacket. And it's troubling me that you expect me to know where it is. Somewhere thereabouts on the floor, one presumes. Helpful? What matters at the present time, my dear fellow, is simply whether or not my deduction was unerring. But Hurley, Bruno said it when he came in, didn't he? I had a surprise this morning. Ha 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 ha! Well, that really is a surprise. Yes, this man is the pride of the British Empire, the famous consulting detective, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. There can't be a single person in the world who doesn't know his name. Alright then, enough of this silly conversation. Come and eat this bacon before it goes cold. And I have a new herbal tea for you to try too. My latest special blend. And here we have Iris Wilson, Mr. Sholmes's lodger and companion. A truly exceptional young girl who's the author of a highly successful serialization here in London. Yes, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, as published in Rance magazine. So, Mr. Naruhodo, won't you put us out of our misery? What surprised you this fine morning? Oh, well, I received a letter from Japan. Oh, from Susie, you mean? Was it really? That's right. She had some rather startling news, in fact. Ah, intriguing indeed. You must tell us about it over breakfast. Oh yes, what fun! Should I examine the stuff? I don't know if it's changed since the last time we were here. Let's have a look. That machine really is imposing, isn't it? But I can never remember its name. Hurley calls it his great analytoscope. It can analyze anything at all. That really doesn't help me. What does analyzing something even mean? Ah, an extremely astute question, Mr. Naruhodo. Sorry? Well, as Iris said, my machine here spits out analysis results of anything with which you care to present it. But how to interpret those results, that's the key. And I confess I have no idea. Clearly, I'm going to have to construct a great analytoscope a great analytoscope to solve the problem. Or might not help. Okay, the stuff is definitely... well, the stuff hasn't changed, but the discussions has. Books, papers, scientific implements, these shelves are stuffed to the gunnels. Miss Susato wouldn't be able to help herself if she were here. She can't stand mess. Susie might not be able to stand mess, but she wouldn't dare touch those shelves. Oh, why not? Because they're Hurley's? Everything's in intricate balance. Hurley spent ages on it. If you were to touch even one thing, the whole lot would come tumbling down. Susie noticed it was a very delicate arrangement right from the outset. You make it sound like a meeting of great minds. But the truth is, Mr. Sholmes just needs to tidy up. Ah, yes, Mr. Sholmes's faithful musical companion. Wasn't this violin made by somebody famous? Yes, it's a Stradivarius. Now, I'm afraid you'd have to save up for 100 years before you could afford one, Runo. But didn't you buy it for a song, Mr. Sholmes? I found it at a pawnbrokery among the forfeited articles. It clearly said Stradivarius on the label. What? The ignorant broker had no idea of its true value, you see, so I paid a mere 55 shillings for it. Yes, I have something of a turn for shopping. Sherlock Holmes, bargain hunter. How does that skill compare to your great detectiving skill? Is your bargain hunting skill better or worse? But is it really a Stradivarius then? But of course, my dear fellow, it said so on the label. I think perhaps the ignorant broker had something of a turn for selling. It's probably not a real Stradivarius. When it gets to this time of year, Londoners seem to leave their hearths alight all day long, and I love it. There's something very relaxing about watching the flames flit and dance about. But a fireplace in the days of summertime is a waste of space, really no use at all. Rather like a great detective in days of no crimes and no criminals, Hurley. But consider this, instead of a fireplace, a frost place. That's my latest idea. An extraordinary hearth from which emanates a cool breeze in the hot summer months. What do you think? I mean, I suppose you could put like a block of ice in the fireplace and you'd probably get a cool breeze out of that. I think if you invented such a thing, your name would go down in history. The principle is extremely simple. One must, of course, light a cold fire in the hearth. That's not gonna work, Sholmes. Yes, of course, brilliant. The trouble is, none of the fires I build will ever burn cold. Now it taunts me. So, as you British say, it's a bit of a damp squib? Yes, a damp squib. Squibs are a kind of firework, I learnt. So, that make a lot of sense. Because it's not like a damp squib would be very good. Yes, the huge metal chest with the lace cloth laid on it, being used as a table for tea and coffee. It's very sturdy, that's for sure, and firmly locked shut. That chest contains my father's detailed records of Hurley's many cases. Yes, so I've been led to believe, though personally I've never actually seen inside. And that's the way it will stay. Those papers are a secret between Daddy and me. If you go opening it uninvited, you might find yourself being bitten. What? Is there a beast inside there or something? Or is Iris threatening to bite me if I open it? These are different pieces of evidence from cases you've solved, aren't they, Mr. Sholmes? Not quite, Mr. Naruhodo, not quite. These trinkets are a selection from cases I've solved with particular aplomb. They are souvenirs of my success. Memories, Mr. Naruhodo, memories. Really? So tell me about the case in which the bust of Napoleon featured. I forget. Memories, he says. Wonderful, Mr. Sholmes, wonderful. Yes, this is where you note down ideas, isn't it, Iris? What's in the melting pot today? The blue carbuncle. Yes, it's from a case of theft that Hurley solved ages ago. The theft of a precious stone. A carbuncle is another name for a garnet, you see. Especially if it's cut with a rounded top. Oh, really? And this garnet was blue, was it? Well, that's the thing. They're usually red. No blue garnets have ever been discovered. Oh. So who knows what that stolen gemstone actually was? real mystery of the case. A proper Sherlock Holmes conundrum, huh? I can type with my ears shut, you know. I can believe it. When a deadline's approaching, you sound like a Gatling gun. That reminds me of a dream I had the other day. It was really such a funny one. It woke me, actually. I was typing for a whole hour in the pitch black, but I didn't make a single mistake. That's incredible. But then when it got light, I found that there wasn't any paper in the machine. And now I wonder if I've actually been typing at all. I think you might have fallen asleep on the job. I look forward to finding out what aroma your tea will have, Iris, every single day. Oh well, I infuse a different concoction of herbs from the garden every time, so it's never the same twice. When you call it a concoction, it sounds more like a scientific experiment than something for tea time. Oh yes, that's because different blends can have very different properties. Some calm you down, some make you feel jolly, some give you energy. Today's particular blend is something quite special, so you're really in for a treat. That sounds ominous? Right. Anyway. Conversation. Miss Susato's letter. This is the letter that arrived from Japan this morning, by international post. Oh, how lovely! Look at Susie's beautiful writing! I wish I could read it. How is your judicial assistant faring, may I ask? She's very well, thank you. In fact, according to what she's written, she actually appeared as a lawyer in the Japanese Supreme Court and won a case. Really? Oh, isn't she wonderful? Cut above your good self, my dear fellow. I've won cases too, you know. Apparently, Mr. Natsume appeared in the trial as a witness. Natsume. No, I don't recall that name. Of course you do. We helped the man twice. You know, in those two cases that took place on Briar Road 6 months ago. Ah, the moustache twitchy man with the somewhat feline eyes and the moustache. He didn't have two moustaches, Hurley. Yes, who could forget those two cases? They made a very deep impression on me. Although I must confess the details are a little hazy now. A very deep impression they made on you, clearly. So, what was this startling news penned by Miss Susato? Do you remember the case of the haunted lodgings, Mr. Sholmes? Ah, yes, it's very interesting, you know. I don't feel entirely uncertain that a case of that nature did not occur. He's totally forgotten, then. Anyway, in her letter, Miss Susato asked that we read over her case notes again and investigate further. Though it took place half a year ago, for what purpose? Because of something that Mr. Natsume said to her, apparently. He suggested that the real reason she was called back to Japan so suddenly might have something to do with the case of the haunted lodgings. Oh? On Mr. Natsume's return to Japan, Miss Susato's father questioned him about the case, she says. And something Mr. Natsume said appeared to trouble Professor Mikitoba, prompting him to send that telegram. Oh, that case, yes! It was very strange, wasn't it? Yes. And I had compiled the whole story into a nice, neat manuscript ready for publication too. But then Hurley here was all funny about it, remember? He was very mean. That story must not be published, he said, very mysteriously as well. Really? I said that? Are you sure? Do you perhaps know something about it as well, Mr. Sholmes? About why Miss Susato was suddenly told 4 months ago that she had to return to Japan? It's been 4 months now since we waved Susie off at Dover. It was such a shock, wasn't it? The way she just suddenly announced that she had to go back to Japan. Indeed it was, due to a telegram she received from her homeland, I believe. That's right, telling her to return urgently. Yes, because her father had passed away. No, it just said he was suffering from a high fever, the cause of which was unknown. He's not dead. But according to this letter, that news about her father's fever was just a ruse. A ruse? So Susie's daddy lied to her so she'd make the voyage back home? Why would he do that? That's what I want to know. I have to admit, I have absolutely no idea. But she believed it's almost certainly related to the case of the haunted lodgings. Summoning her back to Japan so suddenly like that? I wonder what Miss Susato's father is hiding. Hi Nick, it's going fine. We finished Susato's case, and her father's acting mighty shifty, and apparently he might know something about why Kazuma is dead, and it might be vaguely related to a case involving involving Soseki-san that we haven't actually seen. And so Susato was like, Susato sent a letter telling Naruhodo-san to check over her notes for that, because apparently it's relevant. And that's where we are. Hurley, do you know what it's all about? Why is he fully dressed now? Well, who can say? What? But you said... Please, I have engagements, my dear fellow. My calendar is surprisingly full today. You're trying to run away! Sholmes! An astringent analysis of the matter would be excessive, I feel, even if I were quite at leisure. So, man the fort in my absence, won't you, Iris? We haven't even had breakfast yet, Sholmes. I will, Hurley, don't worry. See you later. He scuttled off rather quickly, though. I think perhaps Professor Mikotoba isn't the only person hiding something here. Soseki-san was involved in 2 cases, but only one of them was forbidden from being published. By, of all people, Mr. Sholmes. Aha! I found them at last! Iris, are they... The notes about the case? That's right, Susie and I compiled them together. The case of the haunted lodgings. Do you want me to read them, Runo? Sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Iris. I have no idea what secrets could still be hiding in the shadows of this case. But perhaps if I read over the notes again, something might come to light. That's the spirit! And so, Harris and I decided to read over the case notes again together. Everything from what happened to our investigation and that fierce battle in court that followed. Reliving every detail. I just need to find a clue. And I have all the time in the world. Because of course, I'm no longer allowed to practice law at the courts of Great Britain. And so I guess it's now time to go back in time and see this case and find out why Naruhodo-san isn't allowed to practice law in Britain again. Is Susato back in England yet? No. It was 6 months ago, a mysterious incident that unfolded on the wintry streets of London. A young woman was found lying on the snowy pavement of Briar Road with a knife in her back. Fortunately, her life was spared, but she was unconscious for several days following the incident. The fog was thick, and nobody saw her attacker, but by a cruel twist of fate, a visiting Japanese student was walking behind her at the time, and was duly arrested. That man was Soseki-san, and the man who effected his arrest was Mr. Sholmes. Believing in our compatriot's innocence, Susato-san and I decided to represent Soseki-san in court. And, after a grueling trial of many twists and turns, we finally managed to prove his innocence. Joyful, joyous, jubilant jubilation! Was the man's reaction after the trial. But his jubilant jubilation was short-lived. We received a telegram from Mr. Sholmes the following morning. The victim of the Briar Road stabbing has regained consciousness. Hurry to Bart's at once. So Susato-san and I summoned a hansom and headed immediately to the hospital. February 21st, 5:30 AM, St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Recovery Ward. So you're betting that Soseki-san is the hardest person to voice act in this game. He is pretty difficult, because I can never find his voice when he isn't doing all of that. Also, look at the rat! Look at the rat! So cute. So cute, the rat. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to be in a hospital, but it is adorable. There you are at last! Good morning, Mr. Sholmes. I think not. Oh? You're late! What on earth took you so long? Your telegram only arrived at 5 o'clock, Mr. Sholmes, and it's a 20-minute ride to the hospital. That's right, and it's 5:30 now. I think we made very good time. The time is utterly irrelevant. The fact is, I have been waiting for what has felt like an eternity. In point of fact, I myself was awoken at 4 this morning by a telegram boy. And feeling it was somewhat unjust that I alone had been roused at such hour, I sent one to you. Oh, you're mad that you were woken up early and so you woke me up too. Cool. Well, thanks for that. Anyway, you're here now, so the victim is over there. She's only just regained consciousness. You should introduce yourselves, and I shall observe from here. Her hair makes her look like a character from the Moomins, right? It is the Moomins, right? That has a character with hair like that. So that's the lady who was found on the snow-covered pavement with the knife in her back. Her name is... Ah, yes, here we are. Miss Green. I'm going to examine the room first. This rounded wooden figure isn't the most charming, is it? Ah, I don't think that's a decoration, Mr. Naruhodo. It's an artist mannequin, I believe, used when practicing sketching the human form in different poses. Nice, you caught up on groovifying your stuff and you're up to date on the story. I believe Beanfest Part 2 starts in Twisted Wonderland tomorrow. And also it's Ruggy's birthday. Tomorrow. Really? It's not exactly what you'd call a typical figure for that purpose, though, is it? No, I suppose not. I confess I've never seen one quite so full-figured before. Well, if you want to draw a full-figured person, it's the right tool for the job. Look, there's a photograph in this frame here. Oh yes, it's a picture of a young gentleman. He looks to be about the same age as Miss Green, I would say. Perhaps the young woman's special someone, do you think? Or brother, maybe? Hi, Mr. Naruhodo. I didn't know you had a sense for matters of the heart. Not in the least. I sincerely said the first thing I thought of. Okay, we can't look at these little things. You can look at the rat, yes. Examine the rat. A mouse, Mr. Naruhodo, an enormous mouse. Vermin in a hospital? That doesn't seem the best. But it looks like a very healthy specimen, doesn't it? It's very plump. I'm not sure we can say that's down to the excellence of this facility, if that's what you were thinking. That must be a bag of Miss Green's personal belongings. She would have been brought directly here after she was found stabbed on the pavement, though. I expect a friend or family member probably brought some things for her. Alright then, let's see what's inside. Change of clothes, no doubt, and... No, Mr. Naruhodo, you must never scrutinise a young maiden's personal belongings. But the young maiden might have some chocolates, or biscuits, or caramel. That still doesn't mean you should look! If she has chocolates, they are her own, Naruhodo-san. There are lots of bottles in that cabinet, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them like that? Yes, Naruhodo-san. It's a lot safer to keep them like that in London than it would be in Japan because we have far less earthquakes. If you were a patient here, I feel sure you'd take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep. Oh, you mean just having them in a cabinet above the bed, I see. I was thinking earthquakes. That is a worry. But at least the cabinet has a lock, even if it's only a flimsy looking one. Oh, I've no doubt you'd managed to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well. I think most people probably wouldn't. There are limits to even what I can do when I'm half asleep, you know, Miss Susato. Ah, this looks like the treatment notes for whoever's occupying this bed. Let's see. Do not permit to run around the hospital. The patient doesn't seem to be here at the moment, so... He or she is probably running around the hospital then. Oh dear, how worrying. What's worrying is why they haven't discharged the patient yet. There are all sorts of medicines in this cabinet, look. Okay, that's... I'm not sure it's safe leaving them in reach of everyone like this. Yes, you're right. I can imagine if you were peckish, you might try a whole bottle or two. Well, at least there seems to be a little lock to secure the cabinet doors. I don't imagine that would stop you if you were hungry. I worry that you'd break the lock. Hunger doesn't turn me into a criminal, you know, Miss Susato. Says the person who wanted to rifle through a stranger's bag in search of chocolate. Good morning. Hello, I'm Ryunosuke Naruhodo from the Empire of Japan. Oh no! Was it your knife that... Are you the man who... No, I'm a lawyer. And I'm Susato Mikitoba. Pleased to meet you. Oh no! Was it your knife then? Are you the one? No, I assure you. I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant. We heard that you'd regained consciousness and wanted to come to give you our best wishes. Best wishes? For me? Thank you. I'm Olive Green. I'm an artist. Olive Green? Your name is just a colour, huh? Well, no, that's not right, is it? What I mean is, I'm trying to be an artist. Well, what I really mean is, I desperately want to be an artist. But the truth is, I don't have any talent. I know I don't. It's no wonder I was stabbed in the back. I don't think that's related, actually. Gosh, this young woman seems to bend over backwards to put herself down. Seeing as we're here, we should ask her about what happened from her perspective. Yeah, I guess her coat, it's, probably olive green? I feel like olive might be a little yellower than this, but I don't really know. About the incident. To suddenly be struck in the back with a blade as you were walking down along the pavement. What a terrible experience you had, Miss Green. It was so cold that day, and the fog was so thick. I couldn't see a thing. That was 4 days ago now, I think. Is that right? Yes, that's right. I'm afraid you've been comatose all that time. But the case has been solved, hasn't it? Well, I've been here in the hospital, I mean. Indeed it has, my dear madame, spectacularly by none other than I, Herlock Sholmes. Actually, none other than I, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, but you know. Mr. Sholmes, as you well know, it was Mr. Naruhodo's hard work in court that solved the case. Are you yet to hear what happened, Miss Green? Yes, I'm afraid so. A gentleman from the police force is supposed to be coming to fill me in shortly. Oh, I see. Me coming around seems to have made everyone frantically busy. I'm so sorry. I should never have regained consciousness. It was selfish of me. Oh, it's not your fault. I think Miss Green needs a hug. Oh no! We're all so relieved that you're on the mend, Miss Green. Really we are. With that kind of attitude, maybe her surname should be Blue, not Green. About yourself. So, you're an artist, are you, Miss Green? Oh no! Oh, I couldn't possibly claim that. I'm a fledgling artist at best. I mean, I'm a student of art, really. At the Thorndyke Academy of Fine Arts. Oh my, an Academy of Fine Arts? Great Britain is such a wonderful country. Tell me, Miss Green, do you live hereabouts? Oh, no, actually. I don't deserve it, but I have a little flat on Brixton Road. I see. How very interesting. Oh, no, is it? Brixton is some 10 stops away on the Underground from here. I feel like Brixton is a place I've been. Thorndike Academy is a mere 3-minute walk from Brixton Town Centre. Does that matter, Mr. Sholmes? Perhaps not, but Briar Road is a far less salubrious part of town by comparison, dwelt in by those of inferior means, including the maleficent Mr. Moustache. Inferior means? I suppose the Seki-san does fit the bill. It struck me as somewhat out of the ordinary for a young fine arts student to be to be walking in such a district. I feel like I've definitely been to Brixton. Seems familiar. Ah, yes. I went there for a concert before. I'm pretty sure. That's all. What's this? She's suddenly clammed up. Mr. Sholmes, you should be ashamed of yourself prying into a young maiden's private affairs. Ha 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 ha! Oh dear me, do forgive me. If you don't mind. I'm being discharged shortly, so I need to pack up my things. You've only been to Manchester or London. Yeah. Well, I mean, Brixton is London. It's in London. London in general covers a lot of different places. Oh yes, of course. We won't keep you. Thank you so much, Miss Green. Is there a Mr. Narrowfodder here? Mr. Narrowfodder? Narrowfodder now? Well, if you're looking for Naruhodo the lawyer, that's me, but... Ah, Mr. Narrowfodder, good. This is for you. The area next to the station. Which station though, Nick? There's a lot of stations in London. I'm guessing if we're talking about near the station, and since you're European, King's Cross and Pancras, right? Because that's where the Eurostar comes in. It's a message from Mr. Saucy Nutmeg. Mr. Natsume sent a message to me. But why would a policeman be delivering a message from Mr. Natsume? Exactly. What's going on? What's a Scotland Yard constable doing playing delivery boy at this time in the morning? Ah, what are you waiting for? Let me see that. Ah, I deducted correctly that you used the Eurostar. I've never actually used the passenger Eurostar. I've only ever used the car trains through the Eurotunnel. I kind of want to use the Eurostar at some point. Oh. Well, this is most unexpected. Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes? Is Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes, he says. Have you not seen this note? No, because you took it right out of my hand before I had a chance to read it, Mr. Sholmes. No, how could I have? It would seem that London's criminals have no intention of letting the great detective rest. A new case calls, a case of murder, no less. We must depart at once. Murder? Call a cab. Time is of the essence. But the trouble is, we've yet to read Mr. Natsume's note. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit in his lodgings once we did. That will be entirely convenient. Convenient? What do you mean? Because the death happened in the lodgings, I assume. I'm guessing it's one of the other lodgers. It's all here in the note, my dear fellows. The murder we must investigate took place at Mr. Mustache's lodgings. Wait, what? I'll hail a fiacre at once. It was only yesterday that Soseki-san was in court and we were dispelling doubts about his innocence. And now, the very next day, there's a murder at the man's own address? He may very well be the unluckiest man alive. Or so it seemed to us at the time, but we were soon to discover it was worse than we thought. Ooh. "21st of February, 7:18 AM. Mr. Natsume's lodgings, ground floor." Oh! The actor? What on earth? Oh my, the gentleman is deceased without question. He's dead. Locum student Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire. Mr. Natsume. Oh, why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court yesterday. I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then I wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch a worm like this. Woeful worm without wiggle! I see you're in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Mustache. Ah! Not the horrible hairlock Sholmes! Shoo! Shove off! Show yourself the door! I never invited you! Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume. I am entirely at your disposal, Mr. Mustache. What can I do for you? Here they are already, the busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson, what a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? Gives me heartburn every time I see your face at a crime scene, Sholmes. Ha! I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is a result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene, don't you go touching anything. Oh, good morning to you too, Sunshine. Alright, let's examine the scene then. Let's start from the left. Oh yeah, set hands off! You're gonna mess up my crime scene. Oh, no, I just wanted to look, that's all. No chance I know you're kind, you'll mess it up just by looking at it. Someone's in a bad mood. There's certainly some bad air in here, isn't there? Ha 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 ha! Alright, sounds like I better talk to the inspector first to try to curry some favour. Alright, I'll talk to the inspector first then. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Yeah, Soseki is looking his usual self. Wait! I was gonna joke in the intro that it looked like Shakespeare. Mr. William Shakespeare. He was a lodger here. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. A bit of a dead loss as it happens, or just dead. Mr. Shakespeare? It was the landlord, old Mr. Garadeb, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fella didn't rise at his usual hour, so Garadeb got worried and kicked the door down. But doesn't Mr. Garadeb have a bad leg? Ah, yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really? Soseki-san? Victim was pretty hard up, it seems. He even done some time inside for petty crimes. He had no money, no place to go, and no friends. His only acquaintances were the people in his house. Oh, just sick Iris on Gregson. Yeah, I wish we had Iris with us. We should have gone home first and grabbed her. Miserable life and a miserable end to it. So, what exactly is Mr. Natsume still doing here? I bet he's been accused of the crime again. He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Well, I'm not saying it's because the fella looks odd or anything, or that he acts suspicious. But I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the culprit. I mean, cohabiter. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you? Oh dear, Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again. It certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he? Oh man, how unfortunate. Anyway, I can't say much until the coroner gets here. But I don't think the fella's been a goner that long. The body's still warm. Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body. I'm kind of glad I don't have to Shakespeare. In a way. I wouldn't know how to do it. What a terrible thing to have happened. It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences. So the victim lived here on the ground floor and your room is just 1 story up, isn't it? Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbours, I suppose. So did you know the victim? Were you friends? What's the matter with Soseki-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it? Well, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But did he ever invite me to his room? Never! On my honour, I swear it. What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you'd never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Through that inspector over there. I guess I need to talk to the inspector again. Maybe. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Oh wait. I've already done this, haven't I? Yep, I've already done this. Am I allowed to look at things yet? Nope. You've talked to the inspector, and oh! Sholmes, what are you doing? Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Ha! You need only to observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating, naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madame, patience. We've not been here in this room 5 minutes. So far, all I've managed to deduce is what's actually happened. My goodness! But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could indeed see it that way. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. The first, that there was a physical struggle here last night in which the victim fought for his life. Doubt. Mr. Natsume, what's wrong? Is something that Mr. Sholmes said significant somehow? No, don't mind me. Forget I was here. And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips. Nonsense! You're looking very shifty there, Mr. Natsume. All right, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' deductions? No, please, pretend I'm not here. Invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant. Impossible to ignore. You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail. But of course. Let the theatrical tragedy before us be unravelled by my great deductions, presented for your pleasure in 2 acts. We've heard some truly astounding great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes this time? So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise for Sherlock Sholmes's Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. The Great Deduction. Topic 1. Cause of death. But very quickly I need another drink, so I'll be Okay, I'm back. Yeah, time to debunk the great deduction. Debunk the great deduction, indeed. Well, first we've got to hear it. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Boom at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate, which contains, you will observe... Is that... one half of a sizable bar of soap. Oh, soap! I get the feeling that the foam at his mouth is probably because he decided to eat soap. Which is a terrible idea. Meaningful, indubitably. Why is the soap set so purposefully upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Washing his mouth out, Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life is claimed by a poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the leather about this young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. I mean, yes, you probably could die from eating soap, I'd imagine. If you ate enough of it, it could probably kill you. Although, I feel like that would be more than what it looks like it has been eaten, right? Though personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. Don't eat candles, Sherms. Poisoning from soap ingestion. Topic 2. Suicide or murder. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that the death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. Eating candles and soap, do they have pica? Yes, that's the one where you... Do humans get... I assume humans must get pica. I've only ever read it in relation to pets. But I assume it must be something that humans can also get, right? To draw a conclusion on such meagre evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. Just all the twitching Natsume is doing. Soseki-san, no. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. No, that's how they got in to find his dead body, Sholmes. Though forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end in tragic solitude. People eating stuff like... Eating light bulbs is definitely a bad idea. because that's glass, and that's gonna cut up your insides, right? We can take comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. Conclusion: no possible perpetrator present. Doubt. Thus concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes's great deduction. There's just one thing, Mr. Sholmes. You are disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? What was soap made of in the Victorian times? I feel like I should look this up. I feel it involves animal fat and things, right? So maybe it would be edible. Oh no, that one's yellow. So that's... That doesn't sound tasty. Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think a man would have eaten soap? It is quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing. How extraordinary. In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past. Oh, you're working from experience, Sholmes. So you're the one with Pika, huh? You've eaten it, you mean? My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut. And did it? As I writhed in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. I see. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't eat it even if you did. There's something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh, what's that? It's Mr. Natsume. I couldn't help noticing him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye. Almost as if Mr. Sholmes' seductions touched a nerve somehow. Nonsense! Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deductions may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth. Yes, Mr. Sholmes' observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it in at an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must pick out the keywords in Mr. Sholmes' quite brilliant deductions, and discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place. In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise for Sherlock Holmes's Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Course correction. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. Let's read this again. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the extent of the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate, which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful, indubitably. Why is the soap set so purposefully upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. Well, you can't deny that a fork implies the man was eating something, or about to eat something. Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I would prefer to use a fork than to attempt it with chopsticks. I feel like a spoon would be better, but, you know. And of course, only half the bar of soap is left on the plate. But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap? Okay. So what are we looking at here? Let's look at the teacup. Do you think he was drinking tea with his soap? The cup's empty, so there's no way of knowing. Aha, how about this for an idea? Perhaps the cup was full of water, and he was dissolving soap in it so he could gulp as much down as possible? Please remember, he may not have actually been the soap lover he's been made out to be. I suppose you'd eat soap with a fork, would you? I don't think it's a question of which implement you'd use. You shouldn't eat soap, full stop. But then why? Why does the man have a fork in his hand? Oh dear, I understand your frustration, Mr. Naruhodo, but please don't take it out on me. The point is, if we decide the man used this fork to eat the soap, we wouldn't be changing Mr. Sholmes' deduction. So we really ought to consider some other clues. Okay. Okay, that's all the movement we have, I see. The fork, the teacup. What's that on the floor? Oh, there's the other half of the soap. Look, there's more soap on the floor here. Mr. Shamspeare must have really loved the stuff. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruhodo. Look closely at this soap. Do you see that it would fit together perfectly with the half bar on the table? What the... How can that be? I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart. Cool. So we have the... Clearly, no soap was consumed. Except for by Sholmes.
Take that!
Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course. The other piece of soap reveals the answer. It being the other half of the soap on the table. In short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive a man to attempt to eat soap. Just look at Naruhodo's side-eyeing Sholmes there, like, you already told us you ate soap once, sir. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, only took a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The contents of the teacup, probably. Mr. Shim's still pushing the soap argument, then. Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. Right? Which is also why when, like, sinks that you're washing your hands in say that they're not drinking water, I'm sort of side-eyeing them like, if this water isn't good enough for drinking, why am I using it to wash my hands, which I'm then going to pick up food with? But there are no signs of food in this room at all. Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it? So I'm going to assume the teacup. Let's just double check. I mean, it could be the fork, but there's no sign of anything that he was eating. So it must be the teacup. Let's go with the teacup.
Take that!
Yes, the victim's life was claimed by the poison that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been the vessel of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. Poison in the tea. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? That single teacup suggests the answer. Ah, the Western vessel for infused hot drinks, again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions so far. Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shakespeare was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that. But what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when he heard Mr. Shim suggest it. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for more clues. Okay. Oh! There's another teacup right here. It's another Western vessel for infused... It's a teacup! And it too is empty. Given that he's actually holding this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the cup from which Mr. Shakespeare was actually drinking. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up to now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this. I almost don't want to say it. Yes, I know exactly what you feel, how you feel.
Take that!
Did the man dine and die alone? This other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there were 2 teacups in this room all along. In other words, this is a strong indication that the victim's last supper, there was a guest present. At the very least, we can say now with certainty. that somebody else was here in the room last night, taking tea with the victim. What are you talking about? Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly unreasonable! To draw a conclusion on such meagre evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Do you mean to say you know who exactly was in this room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. But the identity of the guest who was in here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Because it's probably Mr. Natsume. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. Empty bottle? Let's have a look at it. It's empty. Empty of liquid, but full of air. That makes you think, doesn't it? It makes me think that you're full of hot air. Thinking about if we should be thinking about who else was in the room at the time. Bother, Suzetto-san's quip in response was cleverer than my original riddle. The pile of books is probably the thing, right? At first glance, it seems that the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see. The titles read... The Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, Canterbury Yearnings, and... Those are very familiar book names. Emile for Gabriel. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but... They're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed. So Seki-san had just been to a bookshop and bought them. That's right. And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim. Yet Mr. Natsume claims to have never been here before. What does this mean, do you think? I really don't know what to make of it. Pile of familiar books. Yeah.
Take that!
Indeed. What reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Quite so. It's no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth. Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at a second-hand bookshop. That's just a coincidence! In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment. No, never! Non-negotiable! If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. Little Shadow Soseki doing his thing. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. In short, there is only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in this room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Sholmes's Great Deduction. Soseki Natsume at the scene. Although we have to assume that Soseki-san is innocent on the basis that he is still alive and is back in Japan. Not again, not again, not again! Not again! Well then, Mr. Natsume, it would appear you're going to have to accompany me down to the yard. Again. But wait! Hold your horses! Yes. Door, key, locked. Entry, exit, entirely impossible. He's so flustered he's being even stranger than normal. That's true, the fact that the door is locked kind of suggests that, that just suggests that he died after you left, though, Soseki-san. That doesn't actually clear you of poisoning him, because poisons can be slow-acting. What, you think that's an alibi? You could just have made a copy. What? You live in the same building after all, you could have plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. But... Misery me! Sorry, sir, you get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache. Ah, you horrible hairlock Sholmes! He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying outside, there's a carriage waiting. Welcome, Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire. I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but... You have to help me, please, please, I'm innocent. Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. And one more thing. Oh? Yes? My poor little kitty cat. Let's give him his breakfast for me. Oh yeah, Wagahai! This was before Wagahai was living with us. And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken. Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. My dear fellow, that honour belongs to you. This is technically true. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. Ah, and of course... What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garrideb, who discovered Mr. Shanspeare. Ah, Mr. John Garrideb, yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go talk to him later then. Alright, let's examine the scene. We'll start at the right. There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just this wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked. Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter? was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all. Prosecutor Lord Van Zeeks? Yes, he's so reckless with his wine glasses. He was thinking it's a waste and he should donate some to the needy. Yes. Yes, Van Zeeks, donate your crystal goblets to the needy. If you're just going to throw them across the room. You can suggest it next time we meet. Look at these extravagant bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room with its grim shady goings on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamt of being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord, a daimyo or such like. With a chonmage topknot? Every Japanese man wishes he had a chonmage. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but we're gonna go with it. Oh, you'd look wonderful with one, and you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a chonmage and a sword? As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of a former window tax that Britons had to pay. What strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in a property? It's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh! What is it, Miss Susato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. Oh yeah! I can see that there's like 3 unmortared bricks right there. Huh. Oh yes, it looks like an amateur. It looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shakespeare who did this, I wonder? Being the lodger renting this room? I mean, if he wanted a breeze, that would be a good way of going about it. Why is there soap in there? Oh, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge. And there's something on it. What, outside? It's cold out. It's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold. But more importantly, what is on the ledge out there? What are these snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on the ledge outside the window? I have no idea. But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, it's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are 2 after all. Oh dear, I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap. Ah? Do you see in the middle there? There's a patch that's a different colour. It's sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinamaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? The bar of soap has been entered into the court record. Bar of soap. A cheap bar of soap that was discovered just outside Mr. Shakespeare's window. It's one of 2 that were found there. Can I examine that soap? This part is a different colour. It's an exquisite design, isn't it? Trust the British to turn a boring bar of soap into something special. I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinamaru's design of the Japanese flag. I expect this is rather expensive soap. That doesn't seem likely given who it belongs to. It feels like we should dig it out and find out what it is, but... I wonder if he was like making soap to make money. And they were sort of like drying outside his window or something. Oh, what's this? What's this? It looks like part of an envelope, I think. Yes, I think you might be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was opened. Is that significant? Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps. When you look around the room, there's no sign of a letter or the rest of the envelope, or the rest of the envelope, in fact, is there? Ah, she's right. That also seems to be a weird way of opening an envelope to me, but... And yet here we have the torn off end of an envelope. Just strikes me as unusual. I agree. We'd better take this, just in case. The torn off end of envelope has been entered into the court record. A ripped piece of an envelope that was found in Mr. Shakespeare's room. The rest of the envelope could not be located. Can we investigate that? And see perhaps what was written on the other side? No. Okay, it is an envelope. You can kind of see in the middle of it. Whoever opened this envelope didn't bother with a letter opener or scissors, did they? Yes, whoever opened it was clearly someone with an unrefined temperament. And who also didn't care about ripping the letter inside, I guess. And judging from the angle of the rip here, the person in question must have been right-handed. How can you tell that? Miss Susato, I think perhaps someone's been reading too much of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You can never read too much of it, Mr. Naruhodo, never! Yeah, that's apparently all I can look at right now. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Ah, I see. Yes, now you've pointed it out. I can see there's a slot just here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean, if you put a coin in here... That's right, that would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold? Yes, or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. It's a gas-powered lamp, I guess. This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall. Gas lights, a gas stove? London really is a city of gas. But now I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they? Oh, yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there. Well, I much prefer a real fire anyway, it's so much cozier. But yeah, it's like... Because... So it's basically like, poor people had to brick up their windows to avoid the window tax. But then you'd like don't get any heat from the sun or anything coming in. So like then you just have to spend more money on the heating. So I don't know. Also, bricked up window. Gas. He could conceivably have asphyxiated from having the gas on in a sealed room. Right? I'm gonna leave his body to check last, so... This is some sort of makeshift stage, I think, isn't it? Where does the audience sit, though, for the nightly Shakespeare performances? Actors aspiring to the great stage must practice their art, Mr. Naruhodo, with or without an audience. In fact, on a related note, perhaps you should set up a mock bench for the defence in your office. What? Then you could practice your art every single day. I'll think about it, if you promise to don a beard and play the role of the judge. Well, if that would help you achieve your goal. This I have to see. Judge Susato, huh? I guess it's just him now. Oh, the poor man, so young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death, being poisoned as he was? Depends on the poison, right? I don't know. All we can do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder. Do you think that putting our hands together in Japanese prayer would help a British soul? Sorry? I made sure I had a reference at the ready for just such an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? Ah, one of the teacups that Mr. Shanspeare and his guests drank from last night. But don't go drinking from them, Mr. Naruhodo. There's bitter poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true. So, one was Mr. Shanspeare's, and the other must be the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from. But Soseki-san wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so that we can examine them in more detail later. The pair of teacups has been entered into the court record. The teacups used by Mr. Shanspeare and Mr. Natsume. The one with the green line around the rim was Mr. Natsume's. Yeah, the other one's like a red line, right? Do we think this is Mr. Garrett? I think this is Mr. Garrett. Looks like you're having a good super round, eh? No, okay. It was Inspector Gregson. So let's do this again. Looks like you're having a good snoop around, eh? There we go. Inspector Gregson, back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fellow in the clink, I went and reported this to the investigation division. In 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. Oh, I see. Well, we'd better be leaving then. Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low being back in a cell again so soon. I'm sure we should probably go and... he's moving! The dead body's moving! What's wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Yeah! Out, out, brief candle! Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player. That struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Now, how soundeth the next part? It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Indeed! Oh, happy day! Well, he seems to have collapsed like a puppet with his strings cut. What? Walking Dead! The fellow isn't dead at all? What was that nonsense he was saying, though? I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Ah, from Macbeth. I clearly do not remember Macbeth very well. I had to study that at school. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Shakespeare. So it was that the victim, Mr. William Shakespeare, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment, and Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime. Whatever that now was. We don't have a dead body after all! 21st of February, Briar Road. So there's an actual Shakespeare, does that mean there's also an actual Sherlock Holmes? Well, Sherlock Holmes is our actual Sherlock Holmes. I'm pretty sure he's called Sherlock Holmes for copyright reasons. He might have been actually called Sherlock Holmes in the Japanese version. "21st of February, Briar Road." Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsume. Arrested for murder, but then the victim comes back to life. Also, is that Sherlock Holmes peering in through the window there, just underneath my text box? Okay, no, maybe it's not Sherlock. Maybe it's not Sherlock Holmes. It's someone else dressed in yellow. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Shakespeare did consume poison as we deduced. But was it an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder? Wait, does anyone consume poison in Macbeth? I really don't remember. No, the poison chalice in Macbeth wasn't actually a real poison chalice, right? I don't think, anyway. Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? He looks like he's trying to see into Soseki-san's lodgings. Actually, shouldn't that be Shakespeare's lodgings? Since that's the one with the soap on the windowsill. Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Excuse me, could we have a word? Ah. He just ran off. I feel sure I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? I do too, but I don't remember. Alright, let's look around. The Garadev household and Mr. Natsume's lodgings are in a prominent position there on the corner. Sometimes when I look at the building, I can't help feeling that it's a bit of a slant. It does rather look as though it would collapse even in the smallest earthquake, doesn't it? And isn't it supposed to be haunted as well? I think I might have a hunch as to why Soseki-san has such a hunched back. Yeah, it's kind of a good thing that London doesn't get so much in the way of earthquakes. With the exception of the top floor where Mr. and Mrs. Garadev live, all the windows are bricked up. Yes, that's because of an old window tax that was charged on the number of windows a property had. In order to pay less tax, the poorer members of society filled in many of their windows. But the tax has since been abolished, hasn't it? So the windows could all be opened up again, surely. Then you have to pay for new glass. Unfortunately, it would appear that the residents of this district can't afford to pay to have the work done. Yes, that is a sad state of affairs. Especially for people like poor Mr. Natsume who have to live all cooped up in a windowless room. I suppose that's the price you pay for living in very cheap accommodation. It all seems rather pointless when you put it like that. London's blanketed in fog again today, and the sky is covered in cloud. But if you look carefully in the distance, you can just make out the Crystal Tower being built. Ah, the Crystal Tower, yes. The centrepiece of the great exhibition that's to open in 6 months' time. Everyone's talking about the great exhibition of London at the moment, it seems. Well, it's to be the largest event of its kind anywhere in the world, with technology and scientists from all over. I can't wait for it myself. Do you think visiting students from the Far East like us will be granted entry? Should be public, right? The last great exhibition that was held in London had more than 6 million visitors, it seems. And this time the British are determined to make an even bigger success to outdo the Paris Exposition. I see. That's an incredible number of people. And with so many people expected to attend, we should easily be able to slip in unnoticed. There's always the honest approach of buying tickets at the main entrance, Mr. Naruhodo. Yeah, but apparently that there was a window tax. I don't know if the window tax. Just a sec. Is that real? Yeah, in 1696, houses with more than 10 windows had to pay 10 shillings. Many houses bricked up their windows to reduce the number, which caused health problems. There you go. Why has someone built this snowman on some sort of pedestal, do you think? That's not a pedestal, Mr. Naruhodo, that's part of the snowman's body. Really? But it already has a perfectly good body. Well, it's true that British snowmen are usually made with 2 balls of snow. Perhaps this is a foreigner. And now we're looking at him as if he's strange. Poor man, I know how he feels. If anything, it's Japanese and British 2-ball snowmen that are the strange ones, right? Sorry, isn't it? After all, real people do have 3 sections: head, torso, and legs. Do you ever think that perhaps you think about things too much? I do wonder why some people make snowmen with with three snowballs and some with two. I'm definitely a two-sphere snowman person. You know, when I can actually make snowmen, when I actually get snow, which I'm still sad about not happening this year. Oh yeah, should we... No, we can't look at that. Oh, the bike. There always seems to be a bicycle outside the Garradeb residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain at the moment, in fact. That one seems very warped, though, especially the front wheel. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, do you think? No, it's because someone hit it into something and now it's unrideable. No, I'm afraid that may be a result of the rider's incompetence. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then, there's a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Oh dear, I fear you may be right. Yeah, whoever wrote this has clearly, like, ridden it into the fence or something. It needs straightening out or a new wheel or something. I think that's all we can look at around here. We may need to move. A new location has been added. Let's go to the Garradebs. Or just Mr. Garradeb, because Mrs. Garradeb is in prison. 21st of February, the Garradeb's room. Here we are again, the eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode. We're here because Mr. Garradeb's the one who discovered the incident this morning, don't forget.
Ah, you chaps, eh?
Yes, good morning, sir.
Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday.
It was quite a trial. As much for Mr. Garradeb as anyone, really.
Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bully nonsense this morning.
I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Garradeb.
Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room.
Those were exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? Oh, you don't need to stand up, sir. You can sit down. I'm gonna look around his room again. That's your military uniform, isn't it, Mr. Garradeb?
Well, ceremonial garb, yes. Been hanging on the wall ever since my retirement bash. Not in active service now, you know. Doesn't mean much to me anymore. You could have the old thing if you wanted it.
Well, it might suit Lord Van Zeeks, perhaps. It might suit Lord Van Zeeks, perhaps. An overly ostentatious outfit like this could be just what he needs. Very tactful, Mrs. Zato. Very tactful indeed. There's a single apron drying on that enormous cannon-shaped clothes horse, look. No, Mr. Naruhodo, that's a real cannon. I knew that, I was just testing you.
Piece of history, that is! Seen plenty of action on the battlefield, I can tell you. Now the old girl and I are just enjoying the peace and quiet of retirement together. And of course, she'd come in handy if the enemy decided to launch an attack again.
Is there a war going on that I don't know about? Oh, a copy of France's magazine. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is being read all over London. Isn't it wonderful?
Naturally, one asks oneself if such a singular detective could really exist. But having met the chap, it's undeniable. He is most certainly singular.
Yeah, imagine if there was more than one Sholmes.
Singularly dangerous.
That's genuine public opinion for you, Mrs. Zato. Perhaps it should be reflected in the stories. Make no mistake, Mr. Naruhodo, I intend to sniff out the sort of public opinion we just heard, personally. I'm starting to see where Mr. Sholmes' untainted reputation comes from now. Yes, more than one Sholmes would be, oh no. Indeed. Good to see Mr. Garradeb's Medal of Honor still proudly displayed on the wall. The inscription reads, "For distinguished participation," if you remember. Yes, I remember, because I remember thinking even I might stand a chance of picking up honours like that.
Wouldn't know it to look at me now, perhaps, but I had my devil-may-care days, you know.
Devil-may-care? What did you get up to?
Well, all in the past now, of course. And best luck there.
Best not, I want to know now. Ah yes, those enormous mortar shells. It's quite something seeing them up close, isn't it? Didn't you say something about firing them into the barracks, Mr. Garradeb?
Ah, you remember, do you? Just a little mishap that occurred during training one day. What are you doing firing on your own men? The captain bellowed at me.
I'm not surprised. A little mishap doesn't really do it justice, does it?
Well, one has these little incidents when one's a hot-headed young private.
Perhaps I should put some evidence that's resulted from one of my little mishaps on display. Oh, does the great lawyer, like the great detective, want to exhibit some trophies of his finest moments? That might be cool. You look rather dashing in your uniform there, Mr. Garradeb.
Ah, that old portrait, eh? Drawn by an art student who used to rent the room downstairs.
Oh, you look so wonderfully young and courageous and strong.
Yes, well, the chap presented it to me one day and asked if I'd let him off the month's rent in return.
Oh, I see. So you did, presumably.
I bolly well did not.
Oh.
Portrait is a portrait, but rent is rent, eh?
And yet it's still there proudly on the wall, so you clearly liked it. Not paying for your art, eh, Mr. Garradeb? We know what that screen is hiding now. The aftermath of the fiery altercation the other day.
Don't suppose I'll be able to clear that mess up for some time now.
Oh dear, this must be a very difficult situation for you.
I'll say people talk about twists of fate and whatnot. But this is a twist and a half, a rotten show all round.
He's clearly struggling with everything that's happened. You paid the artist an exposure. I guess. But also that is not the correct way to pay your artists. There's a good view over the wintry East End from up here. It's an oppressively grey scene. There's really nothing comparable in Japan. And down below, Briar Road, partly blanketed in snow. And the pavement where poor Miss Green was struck in the back by that knife. Thinking about it, this is the only room in this building that actually has a window to the outside world. Sometimes, Great Britain really does seem like a strange land, doesn't it? I suppose all foreign cultures seem strange at first. Imagine how an Englishman would feel on arriving in Japan and seeing people with a Chonmage top knot. Well, that's a good point. That's an impressive collection of cakes on that fancy silver cake stand bar. I feel sure that it was full of cakes when we first investigated here as well.
Yes, quite right. Haven't touched it since. Haven't done much at all, really, since it all happened. Town has rather stood still for me, you know.
But that's such a waste of cake! They'll have gone all dry. And stale. Why would you waste cake like that, Mr. Garadab? Oh. Time has stood still. Now that's an interesting phrase. I might be able to use that excuse when I'm next supposed to be tidying the office. You could just tidy up, Mr. Naruhodo. These shelves look like they've been completely torn apart by a wild beast.
Remind me of the Battle of Maiwand, don't you know?
The experiences of a seasoned veteran.
Enemy had us surrounded on all sides. We really thought we were done for, the whole Bali company. We were taking a real pounding from their cannons, so all we could do was run for our lives.
Oh, I thought that story was going in a different direction, actually.
Well, the whole experience taught me one thing, I can tell you. When you're done for, you're really done for.
That's not what a lawyer who often finds himself under fire wants to hear. I think that's everything I can look at in here, so I guess it's time to talk to Mr. Garadab. It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear that you discovered what had happened.
Ah, well, that hopeless actor chap rises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no bolly answer.
And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door?
Well, I called on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course.
Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behaviour, I'd have to kick your door down every morning.
Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that.
Is it just me, or is he avoiding our gaze now all of a sudden? And also sweating profusely? Suspicious. Except that I doubt he's the culprit in all of this, since this'll be before our last trial from the first game, and he was in the jury for that one. Except that it was a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the door. The victim's name is Mr. Shakespeare, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, William Shakespeare. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now.
And how would you describe him?
In a word, destitute.
Destitute?
Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke or has a bully screw loose.
So hard to choose which category Soseki-san would fall in. Both. Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude.
He was doing research as well.
Research into what?
Shakespeare, of course, Shakespeare. Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know. Romeo and Hamlet and all that.
Man, Romeo and Hamlet would be an entirely different play. Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, you know, and many of his works have already been translated. It seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, though. Somewhat heavy-handed there. There were lots of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there? Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine he and Mr. Shakespeare would have had much in common. Shakespeare interpretation disagreement that leads to shocking murder. Now, let's hope it's not that. Mr. Naruhodo, really, how rude. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning?
Well now, it must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily, as I remember, and it was completely dark already. That failed actor chap was out at the time.
Mr. Garadeb noticed there was no light from his room or something, I suppose.
Couldn't summon the energy for anything much, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shakespeare got back. And the chap was up till past 1 in the morning, I'll have you know. Suppose he met his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark now.
Well, thank you. That was very illuminating. Not that Mr. Shanster is actually dead, but... Is everything alright, Miss Susato? Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Garadeb, you were up here in your room all evening, if I've understood correctly.
Not a big fan of stairs, not with this blasted leg.
Then, how is it that you seem to know, oh yeah, how long he was up? The precise movements of your tenant on the ground floor, I mean.
Yeah!
That's a very good point. I can't imagine that you would hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Maybe. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it?
I say, I know what you're thinking. It is a bully outrage. I'm ex-military, don't you know? I don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I?
Then how did you know, Mr. Garadeb?
It's the gas woman. The gas tells me everything.
The gas? What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything?
Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by pipes.
Yes, I'd more or less worked that out. Oh, so you could hear the pipes. Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas main outside. And the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too.
Let me see if I can explain. Let's say if I was to light the gas lamps up here, what do you suppose would happen?
Well, obviously the room would get brighter.
Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment.
What? They dim? Why? Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp it briefly uses more gas than usual, and that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it? Yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single supply pipe. Is that supposed to happen, though? It sounds rather undesirable.
Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless. Long worn out. Barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposite's also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here and they glow brighter in the rest of the house.
Ah, right, I see.
So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere. You've got it! Oh, of course. Because when people come back home in the evening and before they go to sleep at night, what they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever. In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house. So you are kind of spying on your tenants, just via the gas lamps. Gosh, that's fascinating, Mr. Gyarados. Absolutely fascinating. Oh, well, nothing to it, really. And I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Gyarados is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. Perhaps we want to go to the prison and speak with Mr. Natsume again. Good idea. Yes, let's go to the prison. Poor Mr. Natsume. He had one night in his own bed, and now he's back here. 21st of February, local prison, cell 9. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now? Locum student Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire. Oh, yes? What is he? Tell me, is he a ghost? Is he here to haunt me? Let me guess, you're talking about Mr. Sholmes. He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume, not a ghost. But his diabolical deductions, they're not of this world. They've left me. Ah, cursed, I'm cursed, I tell you. Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the deduction too. Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news. Oh? The victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life again. Now, in the absolute worst case, you could only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume? It's terrible! Oh? I'm stuck in this cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick. You did it, didn't you? Confess, you're a killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions. I'm sorry to hear that. Ah, that selfish shyster. Make up your mind, are you dead or alive? If you are going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickedly wishy-washy William. Well, it seems likely that Mr. Shakespeare was never actually dead in the first place. Yes, that might make sense. I'm pleased he's alive, of course. Our lively debate last night was much fun. I'd be sad to think it was our last. Oh. Oops. Mr. Natsume, does that mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shakespeare, didn't you? I'm not saying another word. I demand to have a lawyer present. I am a lawyer. Who do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. Why am I cursed like this? Can you tell us exactly what happened last night then, Mr. Natsume? There's nothing to tell. But But, Mr. Naruhodo at Square, I am eternally grateful for you to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday. The case that saw poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday. After the trial was over, I trudged my weary way back to my lowly lodgings. And that evening, at 9:30 it must have been, I visited Mr. Shakespeare. So you did go to the victim's room then? As we feared. I didn't do anything wrong! I'd never been to his room before, it was the first time. Then what made you decide to go? I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion. But he had to go out, so I bade him farewell. That ties in with what Mr. Garadev said, that the victim went out and came back after 8. We met again later that evening, and at around 9, or just after, when I took him some nice tea I'd brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Shakespeare, were you? Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet! Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. Romeo and Juliet, the other Shakespeare play that I have had to study as a student. Romeo and Juliet, who was the stronger? How would you begin to debate that? I'm sure. Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare! And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison into Mr. Shakespeare's tea. No, never, not at all. Team Juliet won, that was me. And when I left his room, the flamboyant fellow was fighting fit, I swear it, categorically. Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed. That you have a cursed existence. I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time I've learned that it's no place for me. It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture. There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me, they all laugh. I mean, they're not... You're the foreigner, but, you know. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse. But even in my room, I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember, and then 1 week ago I moved into Briar Road. But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable. Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money, it spoke to me. The rent? Obviously there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed! Cursed? Cursed how? The previous occupant, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there. Oh no! He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why. Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that. I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money! A horrible history is a small price to pay. Ah, yes, Soseki wants to spend his money on books and not lodgings. When I realised it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning. Brave or Blinket? So, if the person in the room before him died in that room, and Mr. Shakespeare definitely collapsed, it's gotta be the gas, right? It's gotta be the gas. It's gotta be like gas asphyxiation, right? Carbon monoxide poisoning, right? But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room's history really was. Gosh, was it really so awful? How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened? At first it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my back, watching me. Do you think that might have just been your mind playing tricks on you? No. My mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else. Carbon monoxide poisoning can cause hallucinations, right? It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to the place. A nightmare? You've been having bad dreams, you mean? All the souls who've died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me. That really is horrible. And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night too. The very same night that Mr. Shakespeare was writhing in agony for the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room. Yeah, you're definitely suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning from the gas speed. You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible. Yes, you're right, I know it. And that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home. I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodation with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you yourself may become history. I mean, every room has some history unless it's a completely new building, but a bad history is what we should probably avoid. Phew, Suzetto-san knows how to make the man listen. Of course. Mr. Lord of the Manor is very worried about the curse on my room as well. You mean Mr. Garadab? Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again. Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't go near the place. Ah, perhaps. That may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps and his tenants' movements. Ah, because it indicates that his tenants are still alive. You mean because he's worried about their well-being? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. There must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his let rooms. What do you mean he pays so much attention to the gas lamps? Oh dear, no, it's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please, forget I said anything. No, now you're talking about me behind my back as well. What's important is that Mr. Shakespeare isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come round and he's able to tell us what happened, we'll be able to get you released. Yes, please. Oh, I do hope you're right. Shims or the Inspector? The Inspector, I think. Excuse me. Yes, the Inspector. Inspector Gregson. I've got an elbow overhearing what you just said. And on that note, I have some good news and some bad news. Oh? Which do you want first? The good news, please. Always, every time, the bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way. Then why did you ask me my preference? As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Mr. Shamspeare was just unconscious. He's come round now. Yes, we saw it happen in all of its terrifying glory. He's still being treated by the doctors, but we've managed to get a written statement from him already.
Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume?
Oh, thank goodness it's all over then. I can leave the sombre cell. No, I think that's the bad news. Sorry, no, that's not on the cards. What?
I'm not, Inspector.
Mr. Shamspeare has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened last night.
Implicated someone?
Oh dear. You don't mean... I'm sorry to say that I do, yes. He's pointed the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. Ah! By sweet poison did he seeketh to end my life. That wicked caitiff Soseki Natsume. No. So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You'll be wanting to make the necessary preparations. No! And so, once again, Soseki-san found himself having to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted, or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court and do my utmost to break the curse that blighted him. To be continued. Next time. Because that sounds like a good point at which to end the stream today. So, thank you very much for coming. It's been fun. If you're new here and you've enjoyed your time, please consider subscribing to the channel. Follow me on Twitter, which is where I post the stream schedule for the week. This is the last scheduled stream of this week, which means that there will be a new schedule up later today or tomorrow. Probably later today this time. It will be on my Twitter in a pinned tweet later. The next stream, I think, is going to be some Twisted Wonderland. Because the new event starts tomorrow and there's also Reggie's birthday and I want to do the gacha. But I think I'll do that in the afternoon tomorrow since it's a bank holiday and I have the day off. So that I can then stream something else in the evening. So I'm thinking probably about 2 PM again. For a quick Beans Fest and Gacha stream. And then 7 PM tomorrow as well for something else, which probably Cupid Parasite. But I haven't decided yet. So, hope to see you then or another time. Once again, thanks for coming, and this is Kalla signing out. See ya, bye bye.